The chandeliers at the Four Seasons Boston Ballroom cast dancing shadows across the marble floors, each crystal catching the light like a promise. I stood there in my champagne Vera Wang gown, the one Marcus had chosen because it was understated, watching my husband of 7 years charm a circle of his colleagues' wives with that smile I once thought was meant only for me. Shh, just not. Interesting, his voice carried across the veranda where I'd stepped out for air, silk clutch trembling in my hands. I mean, Sarah's perfectly fine. Good mother material, you know? But God. Sometimes I miss having conversations that don't revolve around charity galas and book clubs. The Boston Harbor stretched before me, glittering and vast, reflecting a version of the city I no longer recognized. Behind me, 200 guests celebrated a wedding that cost more than most people's homes. And there I was, the wife of a successful investment banker, wearing a dress that cost 3 months of someone's rent, discovering I'd become invisible in my own life. I didn't cause a scene. That's not what Beacon Hill wives do. We smile. We excuse ourselves gracefully. We die quietly inside while maintaining perfect posture. But something crystallized in that moment, sharp and clear as the Baccarat champagne flutes inside. I wasn't interesting. Not to him. Perhaps not even to myself anymore. 5 years before that wedding, I was Emma Sarah Mitchell, the girl from Dorchester who put herself through Boston University on scholarships and sheer determination. I wrote poetry that won awards. I taught creative writing to at-risk teenagers. I wore thrifted vintage dresses and danced in the rain without caring who watched. Marcus saw me at a gallery opening in the South End, reading my work at an open mic. He said my passion was intoxicating. He said I made the world feel bigger. Within 6 months, I'd moved into his brownstone on Mount Vernon Street. Within a year, I'd become Mrs. Marcus Whitmore. The transformation was subtle. A suggestion here, a gentle correction there. Those earrings are a bit much for the country club, darling. Maybe skip the poetry reading tonight. The Hendersons are expecting us for dinner. Do you really need to work? The teens you teach will find another mentor. One by one, I set aside the pieces of myself, carefully folding them away like seasonal clothes I'd wear again someday. Except someday never came. The storage box became a coffin. After the wedding, I went home alone. Marcus stayed behind to network his favorite word for forgetting I existed. I stood in our bedroom, all cream, silk, and museum-quality art, and looked at the stranger in the mirror. My hair was perfectly coiffed. My skin glowed from monthly facials. My body was toned from private Pilates sessions, but my eyes? Empty as the designer bags lining my closet. I opened my laptop for the first time in months, my fingers hovering over keys that once flew with creative fire. I found my old blog, abandoned 3 years prior. The last post was a poem about becoming. What do we lose when we trade wild for appropriate sit? When we lose wild for it, when we exchange thunder for the whisper of approval, when we silence our roar to become someone's echo. I cried then. Not delicate tears, but the ugly, gasping kind that smudge mascara and stain silk pillowcases. I cried for the girl who believed love meant growth, not erasure. I cried for 7 years of slowly disappearing. And then, as dawn painted Boston's skyline in shades of rose gold and promise, I made a choice. The note I left Marcus was simple. You said I wasn't interesting. You were right. I'm not anymore. But I used to be extraordinary, and I'm going to remember how. Don't look for me. I'm going to look for myself. I took my grandmother's pearl necklace, my laptop, and exactly 1 suitcase. Everything else, the designer clothes, the jewelry, the perfect life I left behind, like a snake shedding skin that no longer fit. My best friend Rachel, who I'd neglected during my Beacon Hill years, answered her phone at 6 a.m. I need your couch, I said. And I need you to remind me who I am. She didn't ask questions, just said, come home. Rachel's Jamaica Plain apartment was 600 square feet of organized chaos, throw pillows, plants, and poetry books, creating a landscape I'd forgotten could exist. Her couch became my sanctuary. "You look like yourself again," she said 3 days later, watching me in jeans and an old college sweatshirt, hair in a messy bun, writing in a coffee shop. "I feel like a stranger," I admitted. "But a familiar stranger, if that makes sense." I started small. I joined a writing group. I reached out to the community center where I used to teach. I bought a journal with a purple cover and filled it with words that were messy and real and mine. The divorce was surprisingly simple. Marcus didn't fight. He looked almost relieved, actually like I de-freed him from an obligation he never wanted to admit was boring him too. "I hope you find what you're looking for," he said at our last meeting, his voice carrying the faintest note of something that might have been regret. "I'm not looking for anything," I replied, and meant it. I'm remembering. 6 months after leaving, I stood in front of a packed community center, about to give a talk on creative writing to teenage girls. My hands shook. My dress, a vintage floral number from a thrift store, felt more authentic than any gown I'd worn at 1,000 fancy dinners. "My name is Emma," I began, "and I want to tell you about the day I forgot I was interesting." I shared my story. The luxury, the loneliness, the moment of recognition on that veranda, the choice to choose myself. A girl in the front row raised her hand. "How did you know it was time to leave?" I paused, considering. When staying small felt more dangerous than standing tall. When I realized I was teaching myself to disappear, and I didn't want to be so good at vanishing. The applause that followed felt like absolution. 12 months after walking away from Beacon Hill, I published my first collection of poetry. It wasn't a bestseller, it didn't change the world, but it changed my world. The launch party was held at that same South End gallery where Marcus and I had met. This time, I wore a crimson dress that announced rather than apologized. This time, I read words that were raw and real. Rachel sat in the front row, crying proud tears. My mom flew in from Arizona. The teenagers I taught showed up in force, holding hand-painted signs that said, "You're interesting" and Team Emma. And in the back, almost hidden, stood Marcus. We spoke briefly after. "You look happy," he said, and I heard genuine surprise. "I am," I replied. "I'm interesting again, at least to myself. That's what matters." "I was wrong that night," he admitted. "You were never not interesting. I just wasn't interested in anything real. I could have been bitter. Part of me wanted to be. But mostly, I felt gratitude for the wake-up call, for the breaking that led to rebuilding, for the chance to reclaim myself." "I hope you find someone who sees you," he said. I did. I smiled. I found me. If you're rereading this and seeing yourself in my story, if you've become someone else's echo instead of your own voice, please hear me. You are not less because someone could unsee your worth. You are not boring because someone was too comfortable to appreciate your depth. Walking away from a luxury life sounds dramatic. But sometimes the most expensive thing we own is a life that costs us ourselves. The view from Rachel's couch wasn't as impressive as the one from Beacon Hill, but I could finally breathe there. I could finally be there. 3 years later, I run writing workshops for women reclaiming their stories. I live in a modest apartment in Cambridge that smells like coffee and possibility. I date occasionally, but I've learned to love my own company first. Last month, a woman approached me after a workshop. "I'm about to marry someone who keeps suggesting I'm too much," she confessed. "Should I stay?" I looked at her vibrant, brilliant, uncertain, and thought of that veranda. Those words, that turning point. "Are you too much?" I asked. "Or is he too little?" She cried. Then she laughed. Then she walked away from the life that wanted to shrink her. The most interesting thing about my life now isn't the glamour, though I do miss those chandeliers sometimes. It's the authenticity. It's waking up and recognizing the woman in the mirror. It's writing words that make my heart race. It's teaching young girls that their wildness is not something to tame, but something to treasure. Marcus was right about one thing. I wasn't interesting. But that wasn't my failure. It was his vision. Now I'm fascinating, at least to the people who matter, including myself. And if you're standing on your own veranda right now, hearing words that make you question your worth, remember this: the most luxurious life you can live is one where you're not afraid to be exactly who you are. Walk away from anyone who makes you smaller. Walk toward yourself. It's the most interesting journey you'll ever take.